Hey, what up everybody? Intravenus here for P.O.L Game Review and P.O.L Music. Today we're going to look at various game controllers of all shapes and sizes. Some of them might be good, some of them not so good. Some of them are rare, and some of them are just plain strange. So stick around everybody, and we're going to get into episode 5. Alright guys, first up we're going to be talking about the Kids Play controller. Now this is a controller made for the Sony PlayStation 3. It is called officially the Kids Play KP801 Wireless Adventure Pad. It's very odd, and it seems to be a controller that was made specifically to be held in the hands of small children. This here is the pink model, and they also make a baby blue model. And I've never seen these in the wild except for once, and that would be this. I have looked them up online, and it's a little hard to dig up, but you can find a few of them, I think only in the UK mostly. And I don't remember ever seeing these in stores. Please let me know down in the comments if you've ever seen one. And if you've held one yourself, do you think you could actually play games like this? Because it's pretty weird. Alright, to start out with, you can tell that it has very weird button placement. Now the action buttons are all along the bottom in a row instead of in the up, down, left, right position. And you'll also notice that the D-pad has been replaced with little buttons. And it's not really that great. It feels really odd in the hands. Both joysticks pressed down, they're much closer together. The R2 and L2 buttons are on the top of the controller, while L1 and R1 are on the back. And it is very unique in every sense. And it does use this USB dongle for Wi-Fi connection, because it does not do the Bluetooth connection that most PlayStation 3 controllers do. And I've tried to play some games with it, you know, and it seems oddly satisfying to hold and look at, probably just because it's so strange and out there. I wouldn't recommend picking this up yourself unless you collect strange controllers, or just controllers in general. It does work. It takes, I believe, 3 AAA batteries on the back, and there's an on-off switch to save the battery life. Very odd. Next up, let's talk about the Gamester steering wheel controller for the Xbox. This is a unique one. It's shaped sort of like a Batman symbol or something along those lines, the Green Lantern symbol, you know. It's not a steering wheel in a sense that it's motion controlled. It's not motion control. The way you use it is by turning one side up and down. That's how you turn right and left. And honestly, this is a really nice controller. I used to use this to play Burnout, Revenge, all the time on the Xbox. It really adds an extra dimension, you know, it's really fun to use. So this one I would recommend. It's got a little bit of a suede grip. The full name is the Radica Gamester, released in 2001. And I do recommend picking this up, especially if you collect controllers. Now, following up that Xbox controller, I just want to touch briefly on a type of controller that some people might not realize ever existed. I don't know if they still make these or not. They might. But back in the PlayStation 2 and original Xbox era, there were third-party companies that were releasing controllers with built-in fans in the grips to keep your hands from sweating or keep them cool. I've never had an issue with sweaty palms playing video games, so I thought it was kind of funny. But at the same time, this is a pretty comfy controller. The buttons aren't that bad. It is officially called the Nyko Airflow EX. Nyko's kind of hit or miss usually, you know. It does have a button on the front. You press that to control your fan. If this one is like the other one I had for PlayStation 2, it might have multiple fan settings the more you press it. Sometimes they have like at least a high and a low. The fan sound does vary sometimes, especially the older ones. They've been sitting around for a while. Maybe they were quiet at first, but now they get a little noisy. But honestly, this one wasn't that bad. This is the one that I would give to guests to use. And to top off the original Xbox section of this episode, I wanted to talk about the original green special edition Halo controller for the OG Xbox. Now, a lot of people that I see on YouTube, online, they talk about and showcase their green Xbox Halo edition, and they showcase a controller like this with their console, but it doesn't say Halo on the top. Instead, it just says Xbox. And now, I don't know if some people aren't aware that there's actually a version of the controller that says Halo on it or not, but often I see bundles online where they're all listed as Halo controllers, and some of them say Halo, some of them don't. Though the people that do recognize, they're selling the Halo version for $80 to $100, even one person $200. So the prices vary, but I would recommend searching for that Halo logo and picking it up, because honestly, I don't think everybody knows about it. So keep an eye out for that. This controller's great, and let me know if you're aware of the Halo symbol on top, or if you are quite surprised by this, because I feel like some people will be, and you might all of a sudden be on the search for the official controller that came with your console. Now, I never bought this console when it was new, so I don't know if there was a series that came with the Halo matching controller and then they started pumping them out with just an Xbox labeled one. I'm not sure. I have a feeling the Xbox One was purchased separately. Alright, let's talk about some Sega Dreamcast here. What I've got in my hands is the Retro Fighters Striker DC controller. This is my new favorite Sega Dreamcast controller. It's way more comfortable in the hands. Button placement is all just like new modern consoles. The only thing I'm not a big fan of is how the VMU sticks out the top instead of being covered up. As you'll see here on my original Dreamcast controller, which I still love this controller, but at the same time, after using this other one, I've kind of weaned away from this. But you'll notice this has an arc at the top that covers the entire VMU, and I prefer that. I like the way it looks. One thing I would like to do is get a transparent blue memory card to match this, since it's going to be sticking out. Yeah, you have the triggers left and right, both buttons, shoulder buttons, and triggers, so you can, they're both R1 and they're both L1, but you can decide which one to use per game you're playing. So you're playing a racing game or a shooter, you might want the trigger. You're playing a game where you're just accessing a quick option, say an RPG or something, you want the bumper perhaps. It's pretty handy, feels really good. It's a little less transparent than the Dreamcast one. It's kind of a foggy transparent blue, but I really like it, and I do recommend you go ahead and get a Retro Fighters controller. They do have them for other consoles, as I will be showing you the one for the Nintendo 64 here in a bit. In fact, let's look at it right now. So this is the Retro Fighters N64 Brawler 64 controller. They happen to have just released a wireless version of this, which is probably the one to go for now, though I imagine it's a little more expensive, and you might not always want to use a controller that charges. Maybe you want a wire just for nostalgia. But this is certainly by far my favorite controller for the Nintendo 64. It's got a way better joystick. The buttons are great. It has Z's on both the triggers, so you could choose which side to use. They're both the same button, and then L and R shoulder buttons. Fantastic. This is the smoke gray transparent version. Oh, I do recommend you get this or the wireless version. I'm sure they're very similar. And then I have an aftermarket memory card in here by Tomei or Tomy or Tommy. I'm not sure. But they're making a lot of good aftermarket products for systems, because you know you can't find the original console stuff that easily anymore. It might be really expensive. So talking about the Nintendo 64, I also want to bring up the Retrobit Controller. This is the Tribute 64 by Retrobit. It is also in the transparent blue. As you see, I tend to like transparent controllers. and or anything electronic really. And this is a mock-up of the original Hori controller that was shaped the same, designed the same for the Nintendo 64 back in the day. And you'll notice that if you try to look for the original Hori now, way expensive. You don't even want to go for it, especially because you can get the same thing basically. I don't have one to compare the feeling of the buttons, but I'd say this is nearly identical for a fraction of the cost. It was like $30 roughly. Don't quote me on that. And here you also have the Z buttons on the R2 placements, and then you can choose which one to use, and then you have the L and R shoulder buttons. Everything is much closer reach for your hands. This would also be great for a child or someone with smaller hands. If you have really big hands, maybe not. I would go for the Brawler 64. Finally, I want to touch on a PlayStation controller. This is the Ultra Racer from Interact. Now, they made these for the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation 1. I'm not sure if they came out for any other consoles, but you'll even see they use the exact model shell. They simply plug up the spot where the memory card goes for the Nintendo 64 model. Now, the reason I like this, though it's not useful for many games, is it feels like you're holding an RC controller, a remote control car. And when I'm playing kart racers, like Crash Team Racing in particular, I liked using this. It added, once again, a new dimension to the gameplay. Made it at first a little more difficult, but then there's like tactics and fun things you could do using the knob and the steering wheels. And it has a little trigger on the back, so it feels like you're using a remote for a remote control car, at least similar to the ones that I had when I was a kid. Now, the button placement on top is very odd. Very, very odd. These are the D buttons, little buttons underneath the wheel. You got the shoulder buttons all on top of the wheel. And we got an A and B button down here, an L button, and a 2-in-1 button. I don't even remember what all those do, but there's a set button on the bottom. I imagine you could program the buttons in a way that you feel comfortable for the game you like using it for. The trigger on the back also has the ability to go forward or backwards, and you can switch which button you're choosing with this switch here. So for the switch on 2, you're going to be pushing the trigger out, I believe, and then the 1 setting you're going to be pulling the trigger. This, like I said, is great for kart racers, and if you're a controller collector, I would recommend getting this. You're not going to use it very often, but when you do, it could be a good time. Alright guys, so there you have it. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much for sticking around this long. Please like and subscribe the video. Share it if you know people that are into retro games and more, because I am making new videos every week. We're going to continue with the schedule of every Sunday and Thursday until further notice, and there are going to be little videos and shorts sprinkled in between. So please stick around, check out some other videos. You might see them in the corners, and I'll catch you next time.